Burnout.
Hmm.
I really am starting to feel that it's become a pop cultural thing to do, right? To be burnt out. It's like a badge of honor. Are you feeling that way?
Yeah, in fact, I see so much on social media now about burnout. And I think it's interesting because just like so many other things in our lives, social media is a powerful tool to highlight something that the collective, the like unit of society may not generally know. And I think that there's so much power in that. But with burnout, I think that there's a danger in misdiagnosing
Mhm.
and making that word meaningless.
I agree because I'm doing some coaching and mentoring of folks, and sometimes I worry that the word burnout gets thrown around when they really just need a vacation, which kind of just means you're probably stressed, right? Or
Right.
you haven't had any creative time. Whereas burnout to me is a much more serious sort of problem.
Mhm.
And I think by using the word burnout somewhat flippantly, as like, I need a vacation, I'm so burnt out, it kind of takes away from the real meaning of the word. And when you're a leader, that can create some confusion on how to best support your team. Are you offering them a vacation or are you telling them they need to take a sabbatical?
Luckily, I have an answer.
So, welcome to Manage Chaos Podcast, where we give you the startup business rundown in less time than it takes for you to get to work. I'm Katrina Purcell.
And I'm Rachel Anderson.
And today we're going to talk about how to spot and fix burnout on your team. And Rachel has told you that she has the answer.
I do. So, the WHO, World Health Organization, they actually have a formal definition for burnout. And it's a really good place to start because there's going to be a key thing in there that I think we should talk about first. So, they talk about burnout as a direct consequence of prolonged stress at work that hasn't really been effectively addressed. And there's three different dimensions, so to speak, to that, three elements. One is exhaustion. So, it's not just I'm tired today because I didn't get enough sleep, although that's a whole nother conversation, but like a true draining even after a long night of
Like, can't
sleep.
get out. Yeah, I can't
Yeah,
get out of bed.
exactly.
Yeah.
And the other one is sort of cynicism. So, are you more skeptical and pessimistic about whatever it is when you show up at work? You can also think of it as like a mental distancing. I just
Mhm.
care less about this. And then finally is an actual inefficiency, lack of production.
Yeah, I think so. And I would say that that's actually the definition for life as well, right? Have you ever
Mm.
had family burnout? Okay, I guess we shouldn't get into that. So,
I plead the fifth.
is burnout really a leadership problem though, or is it a personal problem?
So, this is why I thought that definition was incredibly important to start with, because burnout is defined as a direct result from work. That's the workplace. So, it is, in fact, a leadership problem. It's a culture problem. It's an organizational problem. And there is a fiscal consequence to you ignoring that as an organization and as a leader. So even if you don't care to dabble in this like world of mindset and mental health, which I think is absolutely silly because we care about our physical health all the time and we deprioritize mental health,
Mhm.
but there is a business case to be made for that. So, yes, leaders should absolutely care. Burnout is a sign that even you're not doing your best job at being a leader. Some of the statistics talk about how only getting 6 hours of sleep a night is as damaging as getting no sleep for one night per week. Right. And your efficiency for either of those decreases 25%. So I like to think of it like the bonus structures that exist at a lot of bigger companies where they
Mhm.
say, hey, your bonus is going to be 20% of your total salary, which I know is bananas. No company ever really does that. But just for like shits and giggles of the like example here. Okay, so you have 20% of your bonus, but they then fund the bonus pool, right? And so it's
Mhm.
up to 100%. So at the end of the quarter, they're like, the bonus pool is 100% full, or it's only 80% full, which means you only can get 80% of
Or 20%.
20%. And I think of burnout as being so similar when it comes to your team and your employees, you too, but we're really going to focus on like you're doing a great job as a leader, maybe. What about everybody else? And so you can only get 80% of their total capacity or 60% or 50% when you don't address burnout as a leadership problem, as a culture problem, and care about it as the person that's supposed to be getting the most and the best kind of work out of someone.
It's such a good point because I think sometimes the people themselves may not actually know that they're burnt out and they might rely on someone to help explain that to them or show them or at least ask the right probing questions. So how do you spot burnout on your team? Like there's no sign above someone. I mean, I think
Mhm.
I like to think of, is it Linus that carries around his blanket and
Yeah,
is
and he
like,
has like
yeah,
the
the
cloud.
cloud, right? Like,
Yeah.
so no one's gonna be walking around with like a little burnout cloud around them. So how are you spotting it on your team?
I totally wish that that was a thing. That would be so incredible. It kind of reminds me of this movie too. I think it was called Timer, where like they had numbers above their
I was
head
just
that
gonna say, you
indicated.
know what? I'm sure ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude are gonna come up with some way to have like a little thing above our heads soon that will show how many lives we have left.
That's incredible. I love it so much. Yeah. So, the first thing I would say as part of this conversation is a gentle reminder. And I say this a lot in my own business practice, but employees are humans who go to work and they're not workers who go home. And so, the first thing to recognize is that everything that happens in our lives attribute to how we show up at work. And that's not part of the burnout equation necessarily, because if we think about the definition, burnout is focused on work, chronic work stress, right? But it does go to that overall percentage of how much someone has to give. And so, if they're experiencing chronic stress outside of work, I think that
Yep.
as a leader, it is important for us to facilitate an environment where we can be sensitive to that and we can allow them to kind of pull back sometimes, right? Like not having to give 100% all the time. So, the first thing to spot it is by really creating an environment where people are able to vocalize how much they
Hmm.
give on any given day or honestly any given hour. Because sometimes you have a killer morning and then you're just burnt in the afternoon. And instead of giving them a hard time about like, oh, well, you should still perform high, like maybe it's okay, right? So the first is just really facilitating an environment that does that. But then I think that the other thing that you can do is start to look for signs. So it's sort of like the wind. The wind is actually just a sign that there's something else happening, right? You can't see wind, but you can
Hmm.
feel it. You can feel it on your skin, you can feel it on your face. So you kind of have to do the same thing. You're kind of like a little detective here as a leader, trying to figure out what are the different things that I can identify for my team. And so the first is that if you start seeing um, a significant change of behavior over a long period of time, that's worth investigating. I think that instead of the pressure to push forward, you could say, hey, I'm noticing this. Is this an accurate observation? Is
Hmm.
this something that you want to talk about? Is this fill in the blank, right? And I think also that if people are vocalizing it, obviously that's, a sign. I don't want to discount, like people could just tell you I'm in burnout, like be
Or someone else
investigatory.
on your team could tell you someone on the team, right? It might not
Totally.
be the person who's burning out, but it could be people around them, right? Who have
Right.
noticed that they're short or their temper seems,
Hmm.
more at the surface than usual,
Hmm.
or they're not as collaborative as they normally are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing too that you can do to kind of observe or understand is by having conversations in advance. And I know you and I have talked about this on the podcast before of like you can't cash in at the bank unless you've made the deposits, but
Hmm.
really having a conversation about expectations of team values and behaviors so that there is a very clear, are they meeting those from an efficiency perspective, from a quality perspective, from a fill in the blank, right? If you're
Yep.
creative, if you're scientific, if you're whatever. And this all really boils down to you have to be, as a leader, an active participant and wanting to see these things in order to really spot them on your team.
You do. And so I work with a lot of nonprofits and also a lot of very small teams, right? And I think a lot of times those types of teams are very invested in a mission. They're invested in an outcome. They're really dedicated. And I think we tell ourselves as leaders, well, they're very dedicated to the outcome. That's why they're working so hard. And that's why they're going to go to the mat for me. And those are the folks that we have to worry about the most when it comes to burnout because they are so committed. They're so dedicated to the mission and they really do want that outcome. And it's almost at all costs. And I mean, I know I've made that decision when it's come to a couple of different projects in my career where it was, I'll rest when this is over. Here's the deadline. The project will be over at this point. Like, that's when I'll rest. And
Yeah.
so, keeping an eye on your deadlines, keep an eye on your prioritization, understanding, and just the scuttlebutt among the team, right? Noticing, like, are people, showing up to meetings, maybe not with the same fervor that they did before? Are they declining meetings?
Yeah.
is a big red flag for me. So once we've spotted it, what do we
Mhm.
do about it?
Yeah, that's really the key. So I think there's two phases of what to do. The first is that it's always better to prevent it than have to deal with it once it happens. So, lots of studies have found at this point that psychological safety is the number one indicator of team performance and success. So, making sure that you have done the work that we've already talked about to try and prevent it from happening. I'm going to throw in another tool here, though, and that's that you should learn the most effective and productive and helpful and thoughtful and all the adjectives way to delegate. And I don't know if that's a surprising one, but as a leader, you need to be able to both protect your own time and mental health and work productivity. And in order to delegate properly, there are some tools that you can really use to figure out what's a priority, what are the things that I can give away, what are not. I had a conversation with a director yesterday where we talked about one door decisions versus two-way door decisions, which basically is like, can we reverse it or not? That's, the whole nother podcast. So we'll just say that.
I think we've talked about it before.
Have we? Okay, good. And so, having some of those things identified can really help you delegate. And that helps not only you, but also your team to know exactly what the expectations are and be able to know if they need help in achieving the expectations. And that's like the big, bold underlined, like if they need help, they can identify that. The other thing is that once you have not successfully prevented it, which you can't always, sometimes there's things that happen in the world that are very difficult, is really trying to fix it afterwards. And so the way that you can do that is by finding ways to do the stoplight system, perhaps do we need to stop it? Do we need to pause it? Do we need to keep going? Are there other people that can come on to support an employee so that they can pull back for a time? Is there something that you can do to be more clear about expectations or maybe lower the bar of what the expectation is? That doesn't mean lowering quality, but if you're expecting them to build a Sistine Chapel, maybe you start with just like one room rather than saying the whole thing. And I think the most important thing to know in all of this, because this is about prevention and about recovery for burnout, that modeling behavior as a leader is the most critical component for helping your team believe what you say. And so if you are not doing all of these things for yourself and talking about it with your team, not just doing the boundaries, but actually saying, I drew a boundary for myself that if someone emailed me, Friday after 7 p.m., that would sit in my inbox until, I checked it on Sunday at 5 or whatever, and so that way they hear the actions you're doing behind the scenes as much as seeing how you show up every single day with trying to maintain healthy mental health.
So the other thing is that as you're learning to delegate, teaching your team how to delegate. So especially if you have people leaders on your team under you, right? Ensuring that they understand that delegation is expected and that they know how to coach and guide people who are reporting to them so that they're able to delegate and they don't take everything on themselves. It's not an easy skill.
No, it's not.
We should probably do a whole episode on that. It's definitely not an easy skill. We do have a podcast for you, episode 19. If you're listening in real time, it aired the previous week. Goes into a bunch of really helpful information for burnout for yourself, right? How to deal with it, how to spot it. And I think Rachel said the most important thing, which is preventing it and spotting it before it's gotten to a point where there's kind of a point of no return. Because real burnout, you're not going to fix by taking a long weekend or going on vacation, right? It's generally something that takes months to recover from and really hard internal focused work to recover from.
And frankly, those behaviors are not going to be accidentally passed on. And so as a leader, I think to your exact point, you should be talking about it. You should be training the next generation of leaders. You should be passing on those good, healthy behaviors so that it doesn't die with you doing the hard work and then no further fruit.
So with that, this is a wrap on this episode of Managed Chaos Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. You can follow and subscribe on YouTube. We're trying to reach 5,000 followers this year. We're not on a great trajectory for that, so I really need you to step it up. We are getting lots of subscribers, but we're not going to get to 5,000 unless you help us out. You can also follow or subscribe on Spotify or Apple, wherever you choose to listen to your podcast. We will see you on the next episode of Managed Chaos Podcast.